My son and his wife went on a trip, leaving me behind to care for her mother, who had been in a coma after a terrible accident. The doctors said she hadn't shown any awareness in months. But the moment they left the house, she opened her eyes. I was standing beside her bed, adjusting the blanket, when her eyelids suddenly fluttered open. She looked straight at me and whispered, "Thank God you're here. I was afraid they'd never leave." My entire body went cold. If you're listening to this story, stay with me until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this reaches, because at 64 years old, I discovered how little I truly knew about my own son. My son, Evan, had always been distant even as a child. I told myself that was simply his personality. Not everyone is affectionate. I held on to that belief for years, especially after he married Lydia 3 years ago. So when Evan called me last Tuesday morning, I didn't question the familiar tone of obligation in his voice. "Mom, Lydia and I need to take an emergency trip," he said. "Her mother had another episode. We can't leave her alone." Lydia's mother, Margaret, had been in what doctors described as a vegetative state for 6 months. Ever since a car accident caused severe brain trauma, she lay in a hospital bed set up in their guest room, breathing through machines, completely unresponsive to the world around her. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, even though something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "How long will you be gone?" 4 days. Maybe 5. Then he added, "A nurse will come twice a day to check her vitals and adjust medications. You just need to be there in case of emergencies." I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why they couldn't hire a full-time caregiver. But I was grateful my son needed me for something. Anything. So I ignored the warning in my chest. Thursday morning I arrived at Evan's house with a small overnight bag. The house felt cold, despite the expensive furniture and perfect decorating. Lydia greeted me with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Thank you so much for doing this," she said. "Mother has been very peaceful lately. The doctors say she's stable, but we can't risk leaving her alone." Evan appeared behind her, checking his watch. "Our flight leaves in 3 hours. The nurse will be here at 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Her medications are labeled in the kitchen." We walked to the guest room. Margaret lay motionless in the hospital bed. Machines beeped softly around her. Her silver hair was neatly brushed, her pale lips lightly colored, as if someone wanted her to look peaceful. "She hasn't shown any signs of consciousness in months," Lydia whispered. "Sometimes I talk to her, hoping she can hear me. But the doctors say there's probably no awareness left." Something about the way she said it made me look closer. There was something cold in her expression, something that didn't match the concern in her voice. Evan kissed my cheek quickly. "We'll call tonight. Emergency numbers are on the refrigerator." Then they were gone. Their luggage rolled across the foyer. The front door closed softly behind them. The sound felt final. The house fell silent, broken only by the steady beeping from the guest room. I went back to check on Margaret, adjusting the blanket that had shifted. As my fingers brushed her forehead, her eyes snapped open. I gasped, stumbling backward. Her eyes were clear, focused. "Thank God," she whispered. "I was beginning to think they'd never leave." My heart hammered. You're awake," she winced as she tried to move. "Help me, please." I've been lying still for so long my muscles are cramping. My hands shook as I helped her adjust the pillows. "But the doctor said..." "Evan and Lydia said you were in a coma." Her laugh was bitter. "Oh, my dear," she said softly. "There's so much you don't know." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "They think I'm in a coma because that's what they want everyone to believe." "I don't understand," I whispered. "They're drugging me," she said. "Every day, sometimes twice a day. Lydia gives me injections that knock me unconscious. She tells everyone they're prescribed medications, but they're not." The room seemed to spin. "Why would they do this?" "Because they're stealing everything I own," she whispered. "My bank accounts, my investments, my house in Oregon. They forged my signature and claimed I gave them power of attorney," she swallowed. "They've already taken over $200,000. I felt sick, but Evan would never. He's my son." "Your son?" she said quietly. is not the man you think he is. And Lydia? Her voice hardened. She's a monster. I could barely breathe. How do you know all this? Because sometimes I fight the drugs long enough to hear them talking. They think I'm completely out. Her grip tightened. It gets worse. My blood ran cold. They're not planning to keep this up forever, she whispered. I heard them arguing about when to let me slip away. The words felt unreal. They want to kill you, I said. She nodded. And I think you might be in danger too. I stared at her, frozen. What do you mean? You're here as their witness, she said. When something happens to me, you'll be the one to testify I never woke up. The truth crashed down on me. They weren't using me to help. They were using me as an alibi. Tell me everything, I whispered. From the beginning. She took a shaky breath. The accident was real, Margaret said quietly. I was unconscious for about a week in the hospital. I stayed silent, afraid to interrupt. But when I started waking up, when the doctors began talking about recovery and rehabilitation, Lydia convinced them I was having setbacks. What kind of setbacks? I asked. She told them I was agitated, confused, sometimes violent. I stared at her. Were you? No, she said simply. But Lydia was there for every medical consultation, playing the devoted daughter. Her mouth twisted into a hollow smile. She convinced them that moving me home for palliative care was the most compassionate option. She let out a short, bitter laugh. The doctors thought they were helping a family avoid prolonged suffering. My legs felt weak as I sank back into the chair. And Evan? I asked carefully. Does he know what she's doing? Margaret's expression darkened. Oh, he knows, she said. He's the one who suggested the forgery scheme. My stomach dropped. Lydia handles the medical manipulation, Margaret continued. But Evan is the mastermind behind the financial fraud. The word fraud made my head spin. My son, the boy I raised, the child I sang to when he couldn't sleep, a criminal. How long has this been going on? I whispered. The drugging started about 3 months ago, she said. At first, it was just mild sedatives, supposedly to help with my agitation. But gradually the doses got stronger. Her jaw tightened. Some days I was unconscious for 18 hours straight. As she spoke, her voice grew steadier, stronger. Like telling the truth was giving her back control. The financial transfers started, right after they brought me home from the hospital. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there, she swallowed. But once they realized how easy it was, they got greedy. How much? I asked. As of last month, when I overheard a phone call, they'd moved nearly $400,000 from my accounts. The number made me dizzy. My house in Oregon is up for sale, she added. I never signed anything. They forged my signature using a legal loophole for incapacitated family members. $400,000. I thought about Evan's expensive car, the renovations to this house, Lydia's designer clothes and jewelry. I had assumed Evan's business was doing well. Now I knew better. The nurse, I said suddenly. The one who comes twice a day, Mrs. Reynolds. Is she part of this? Margaret shook her head. No, she's legitimate, but Lydia times the injections perfectly. How? She gives me the strongest dose about an hour, before each nursing visit. Mrs. Reynolds has never seen me anything but unconscious. What about the machines? I asked. The monitors? They're real, Margaret said. But they're not connected to any hospital system. They only track basic vital signs. She looked at me steadily. As long as my heart is beating and I'm breathing, everything looks normal to anyone who doesn't know what to look for. A chill ran down my spine. You said they're planning to let you slip away, I said. What does that mean? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I overheard them 2 weeks ago. Lydia was researching how to gradually increase dosages to cause respiratory failure. My chest tightened. She found medical forums explaining how certain drug combinations can look like natural complications in coma patients. The room felt like it was tilting. They're planning to murder you, I said. Yes, Margaret replied. And they're going to make it look like a tragic, but expected outcome. She wiped her eyes. The family did everything they could. Sometimes these things just happen. My hands clenched. Lydia has already started talking to Mrs. Reynolds. Margaret added, She's been mentioning my breathing seems labored, that my color isn't quite right. She's laying the groundwork. I jumped to my feet. We have to call the police. We have to stop this. With what proof? Margaret asked gently. It's my word against theirs. The medical records support their story. The financial transfers all look legitimate. She met my eyes, and I'm supposed to be in a vegetative state. But you're conscious now, I said desperately. You can tell them. Can I? She asked quietly. Or am I just a confused old woman with brain damage accusing her devoted family? Her voice carried the weight of someone who had already thought this through. Lydia has been very careful. She's built a paper trail showing my mental decline. She paused. She's even had me diagnosed with early-stage dementia, based entirely on behaviors. She reported to doctors. The scale of it left me speechless. How long do we have? I finally asked. They're planning to start the final phase when they return from this trip. She said. They wanted me under the care of loving family, before the tragic turn for the worse. She looked at me, desperate but determined. They needed a witness who could testify to my peaceful final days. My stomach turned. That's why they asked you to come. The truth slammed into me. They didn't bring me here because they needed help. They needed an alibi, a perfect one. Evan's devoted mother, the caring grandmother, the woman who would swear nothing seemed wrong. All those phone calls, all that concern. He wasn't getting closer to you, Margaret said softly. He was keeping tabs on you, making sure you were reliable, unsuspecting. The last bit of hope inside me collapsed. My son didn't need me. He was using me. What are we going to do? I whispered. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes burning with a determination I hadn't seen before. We're going to beat them at their own game. And then she started telling me things that made my blood run cold. We spoke in whispers, even though we were alone, as if the walls themselves might be listening. The first time I realized something was wrong was about 4 months ago, Margaret began. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, as if telling the truth was giving her strength. I was starting to feel more like myself after the accident. Physical therapy was helping, and my memory was coming back. She paused. That's when Lydia started telling the doctors I was having episodes. What kind of episodes? I asked. According to her, I became violent when she tried to help me with basic tasks. She said I didn't recognize her, that I screamed and tried to hit her. Margaret's mouth tightened. She even showed up to one appointment with scratches on her arms. I stared at her. Scratches she gave herself. Margaret said flatly. I felt sick imagining the performance Lydia must have put on. And the doctors believed her. Margaret continued. Why wouldn't they? She was the devoted daughter, exhausted from caring for her injured mother. She shook her head slowly. She cried during appointments, talked about how heartbreaking it was to see me so confused and angry. She looked up at me. She even brought Evan to one visit to back up her stories. What did he say? I asked. Margaret's expression hardened. He played his part perfectly. Talked about how hard it was on Lydia, how worried he was about her, mental health from the stress of caring for me. She let out a short breath. He suggested medication. Might help calm my aggression so Lydia could care for me better. The calculation of it all made my skin crawl. So the doctors prescribed sedatives. At first, I said quietly, Yes, mild ones, Margaret replied. But Lydia kept reporting they weren't working. She mimicked Lydia's voice bitterly. She said I was getting worse, more violent, more confused. Each visit, Margaret explained. Lydia painted a picture of a woman slipping further into madness. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. The doctors started prescribing stronger medications. That's when Lydia began preparing her own injections. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, her own? She showed the doctors the prescription bottles, Margaret said. Let them believe she was following instructions. But she was also adding her own drugs, things she was getting elsewhere. Her voice lowered. I think she has connections from her previous job. Previous job? I asked. She used to work at a rehabilitation facility for elderly patients. Margaret said. She was fired about 5 years ago. Evan never told me why. She swallowed. I later heard from a mutual friend there had been an investigation involving patient medications. Nothing was proven. The pieces began falling into place. She's done this before, I said. I believe so, Margaret replied. And I think that's how she and Evan really met. Not at a coffee shop like they tell people, but through her work with vulnerable, elderly patients. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Evan has always been drawn to easy money, she continued. Even as a teenager. She looked at me carefully. Do you remember when he got caught selling fake IDs in high school? I did remember. 2 weeks suspension. Hours spent in the principal's office making excuses for him. I thought he'd grown out of it, I said weakly. He didn't, Margaret replied. He just got better at hiding it. Her voice softened, heavy with sadness. Nora, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money for them. What do you mean? They enjoy it, she said. The control, the deception, the power they have over someone helpless. My chest tightened. Sometimes when they think I'm completely unconscious, they talk anyway, Margaret continued. Lydia leans over my bed and whispers how pathetic I am, how no one will miss me. My hands clenched. Evan talks about what they'll buy with my money, the trips they'll take. Her voice trembled. They've turned my suffering into entertainment. Rage burned through me. Last week, Margaret said, when they thought I was deeply sedated, I heard them discussing the timeline. I looked up sharply. They want to finish this before the holidays. They've already booked a cruise to the Mediterranean. A cruise. They're using my money to pay for it, she said quietly. And they want me dead so they can enjoy it without worry. The casual cruelty of it made me feel sick. $15,000? Margaret added. A month-long luxury cruise. The deposit is already paid. She looked straight at me. They're planning to be grieving family. Members who need time to heal after. A tragic loss. The audacity was staggering. How do you know all these details? I asked. Because they aren't as careful as they think, she said. When you believe someone is unconscious, you stop watching what you say. She managed a weak smile. They've essentially confessed their entire plan to me. What exactly is the plan? I asked. Margaret took a deep breath. When they return from this trip, Lydia will start documenting what she calls concerning changes in my condition. She'll call Mrs. Reynolds, maybe even bring in another nurse for a second opinion. She'll report my breathing seems labored, that my color is off, that my organs may be failing. But you're fine, I said. For now, Margaret replied. She'll increase the drug dosages to actually cause those symptoms. Her voice became clinical. Respiratory depression. Irregular heartbeat. Signs my body is shutting down. She met my eyes. The plan is to make it look completely natural. I swallowed. How long do they think it will take? About 10 days, she said. Long enough to seem natural. Not so long that it becomes inconvenient. She paused. They want me dead before Thanksgiving. Less than 3 weeks away. And after? I asked. What happens when you're gone? They inherit everything, Margaret said. The house. The remaining money. The life insurance. Her voice turned cold. They've already researched probate laws. They've even chosen my burial plot. She let out a bitter breath. The cheapest one. No point wasting money on a dead woman. I was shaking. We have to stop them, I said. We have to prove what they're doing. I've been thinking about that for months, Margaret replied. The problem is everything has been carefully planned. The medical records, the financial documents, even witnesses who can testify to my supposed condition. She looked at me intently. It all supports their story. I nodded slowly. We know the truth, I said. But proving it is another matter. That's why I need your help, Margaret said. You're the only person who's seen me conscious. You're the only one who knows what they're really doing. What do you want me to do? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then her voice strengthened. I want you to help me gather evidence. Real evidence, she continued. The kind even the best lawyers can't explain away. How? They've made one mistake, she said, a fierce light in her eyes. They trust you completely. Evan believes his sweet, naive mother would never suspect anything. He thinks you're the perfect witness because you're too innocent to see what's really happening. So, we use that, I said. She nodded. Exactly. Over the next few days before they return, I need you to help me find proof. Bank records, medication bottles, anything that shows what they've been doing. She gripped my hand tightly. And when they come back and start the final phase of their plan, we'll be ready. What if they suspect something? I asked. What if they realize you're conscious? Margaret smiled. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw hope in her eyes. Then we'll give them the performance of their lives, she said. We'll let them think they're winning, right up until the moment we destroy them. The determination in Margaret's suave voice sent chills down my spine. But they weren't chills of fear anymore. They were chills of anticipation. For the first time in my life, I was going to fight back against the people who had used and manipulated me. And we were going to win. Ah! The next 2 days passed in a blur of careful investigation. Margaret and I worked together like detectives, gathering evidence whenever Mrs. Reynolds' watch wasn't scheduled to visit. We had to be incredibly careful about timing. During the nurses' visits, Margaret would lie perfectly still, pretending to be unconscious. I played the role of the concerned caregiver, asking the right questions, never revealing what I knew. Mrs. Reynolds was a kind woman in her 50s, who genuinely cared about her patients, watching her check Margaret's vital signs and gently adjust her blankets made me realize how completely Evan and Lydia had deceived everyone. Her breathing seemed steady today. Mrs. Reynolds noted during her Friday morning visit, writing in her chart. How has she been overnight? Very peaceful, I replied, hating how easily the lie came. No changes that I've noticed. As soon as she left, Margaret and I went back to work. Ah! She told me exactly where they had hidden evidence. Check the filing cabinet in Evan's office, she whispered. Top drawer. Behind the tax documents. That's where they keep the forged papers. I found them. Copies of power of attorney forms, medical directives, bank authorizations, all bearing Margaret's signature. But when I compared them to her real signature on old Christmas cards, the differences were obvious. They practiced, Margaret said quietly when I showed her. I caught Lydia tracing my signature months ago. When I asked her about it, Margaret continued, she said she was helping me write thank you notes for get well cards. She shook her head. I believed her. Ah! We also found records of the illegal drug purchases. Lydia had been ordering sedatives online using fake prescriptions and multiple identities. The shipping records were hidden in a box in the bedroom closet. She's been sending them to different addresses, I said, as I photographed everything with my phone. Post office boxes, neighbors' houses when they're out of town, even some to your old address in Oregon. How much? Margaret asked. I added up the receipts. Over $3,000 in the last 4 months. All paid for with transfers from your bank account. The irony made me sick. They were using her money to buy the drugs they planned to kill her with. Ah! But the most disturbing discovery came when I found Lydia's journal. She keeps a diary? Margaret asked when I showed it to her. Not exactly, I said. It's more like planning notes. My stomach turned as I read through it. She's documenting everything. Drug combinations, timing, even how you react to different doses. Margaret was silent for a long moment. Read me some, she said. I opened to a random page. October 15th, I read. Increased morning dose to 4 milliliters. Subject remained unconscious for 19 hours. Breathing stable. Heart rate dropped to 58. Need to adjust to avoid suspicious readings during nurse visits. Margaret's voice dropped to a whisper. She's treating me like a lab experiment. I turned the page. October 22nd. Subject showed signs of awareness around hour 16. Made soft sounds when repositioned. Administered additional dose immediately. May need to increase standard dosage to prevent breakthrough consciousness. My God, I whispered. She's been studying how to keep you unconscious. I flipped through more pages. Each entry was worse than the last. October 28th, I read. Discuss timeline with E. Agreed to begin final phase after Denver trip. Will document declining conditions starting November 1st. Estimate 10 to 12 days for complete respiratory failure. E excited about December cruise. Suggested upgrading suite with windfall. Margaret closed her eyes. They're talking about my death like it's a vacation planning meeting. The final entry made my hands shake. November 2nd, I read. N will be perfect witness to final days. Her testimony about peaceful final weeks will be crucial for insurance investigations. He says his mother has always been easy to manipulate. She'll never suspect anything. Looking forward to finishing this and moving on with our lives. I set the journal down, furious. She calls you the subject, and me N, like we're not even human. Margaret opened her eyes. Because to them we're not, she said calmly. We're obstacles, tools. Then she looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Determination. Did you photograph everything? She asked. Every page. Good, she said. Now put everything back exactly where you found it. We can't let them know we've discovered their plans. We spent the rest of Friday carefully putting everything back, exactly where we'd found it. Every paper, every box, every folder. Nothing could look disturbed. Margaret has coached me on how to act when evanescent, Lydia returned. Remember, she said quietly, you've been caring for an unconscious woman for 3 days. You should look tired, maybe a little overwhelmed. She looked at me closely, asked questions about my condition, what to watch for, act like the concerned, slightly anxious mother-in-law. I nodded, committing every detail to memory. Saturday morning. Mrs. Reynolds' Sitchan arrived for her usual visit. As she checked Margaret's vitals, she paused, studying the chart. Has anyone else been giving her additional medications? She asked. My heart skipped. Her heart rate seems a bit slower than usual. My mouth went dry. Just what's on the schedule you gave me, I said carefully. Mrs. Reynolds frowned slightly. These things can fluctuate. I'll make a note for her primary care physician. Then she looked at me with concern. How are you holding up, dear? This can't be easy. I'm managing, I said. Inside, I was screaming. She was seeing the effects of Lydia's drugs, without knowing what they really were. After the nurse left, Margaret and I talked in hushed voices. They've been dosing you even when they're not here, I said. There must be some kind of delayed release system. Margaret nodded weakly. Check the IV bag, she whispered. Lydia changes it every day before the nurse visits. She might have added something before they left. I examined the IV setup carefully. That's when I saw it. A small additional chamber attached to the main line. Almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. That's it, Margaret said when I described it. She's been giving me extended doses through the IV. That's why I've had trouble staying conscious. Should I remove it? I asked. No, she said immediately. If Mrs. Reynolds notices a sudden change before Evan and Lydia return, it could raise questions we're not ready to answer yet. Time was running out. That morning, Evan texted to say their flight was delayed. They'd be home by Sunday evening, less than 36 hours. What exactly are we going to do when they get back? I asked. Margaret's voice was calm. We're going to let them start their final phase, exactly as planned. She met my eyes. But this time, we'll be recording everything. Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. Evan's name lit up the screen. My heart started pounding. Hi, sweetheart, I answered, forcing my voice to stay steady. Mom, change of plans, he said. Our flight got moved up. We'll be home in about 3 hours instead of tonight. My blood turned to ice. We weren't ready. Oh, that's wonderful, I said. I know you're anxious to get back and check on Margaret. How has she been? The same, I replied. Mrs. Reynolds says her vitals are stable. She seems very peaceful. The lies tasted like ash. Good, Evan said. Listen, Mom, I want to prepare you for something. My chest tightened. The nurse mentioned Margaret's condition might start declining soon. These things happen with brain injuries. Sometimes patients seem stable for months, then suddenly take a turn for the worse. He was laying the groundwork, just like Margaret predicted. "Oh no," I said softly. "What should I watch for?" "Changes in her breathing, her color, things like that," he replied. "But don't worry. Lydia will know what to do when we get back." "Of course," I said. "I'll see you soon." The moment I hung up, I rushed to Margaret's room. 3 hours, she said calmly after I told her. "That's enough time." "For what?" I asked. "To set up the recording equipment." I stared at her. "Recording equipment?" She smiled faintly. "Did you really think I've been lying here helpless for months without making preparations?" "There's a box in the basement," she said, "behind the water heater. Bring it up." "Ah!" When I opened the box, my breath caught. Inside were a small digital recorder, a tiny camera, and what looked like professional surveillance equipment. "Where did you get all this?" I asked. "I ordered it online months ago," Margaret said. "When I first realized what they were planning." She paused. "It took weeks of pretending to be unconscious while packages were delivered. I hid everything before they could find it." Her eyes gleamed. "They think they're so clever," she said quietly. "But I've been preparing to destroy them for months." "Ah!" As we quickly set up the hidden cameras and recording devices, my emotions tangled together, terror and anticipation. In just a few hours, Evan and Lydia would walk through that front door, believing they were about to complete the perfect crime. Instead, they were walking into a trap. "Are you ready for this?" Margaret asked as we heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked at her. This woman, who had endured months of abuse and manipulation, and was still standing. "I'm ready." The front door opened. "We're home," Lydia called cheerfully. The final phase had begun. "Ah! Mom, we're back!" Lydia's voice floated down the hallway, coated in that artificial sweetness I now recognized as a warning. Suitcase wheels rolled across the marble floor. Footsteps approached. Margaret squeezed my hand once. Then she went completely limp. Her eyes closed, her body stilled. The transformation was so perfect that for a split second, I almost believed she was unconscious again. "Ah! How is she?" Evan asked as he appeared in the doorway. His face showed what looked like genuine concern, but now I could see the calculation behind it. "Very peaceful," I said, standing from the chair beside Margaret's bed. "Mrs. Reynolds was here this morning. She said her vitals were stable, but her heart rate seemed a little slower than usual." I watched Lydia carefully. For a flicker of a second, I saw it. Satisfaction. Then she masked it with concern. "Oh dear," she murmured, moving to the bedside. "Sometimes that can be a sign of changes in her condition." She placed her hand on Margaret's forehead with theatrical tenderness. "Poor mother. She's been fighting so hard." Evan stepped beside her. For a moment, they looked like a devoted couple grieving together. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it. "Ah!" The nurse said we should watch for any changes, I said carefully. "What exactly should I be looking for?" Lydia continued stroking Margaret's hair. "With brain injuries like mother's," she said softly, "sometimes patients can take sudden turns for the worse. Their breathing might become labored. Their color might change." Lydia continued calmly. "It's all part of the natural progression of her condition." The way she said natural progression made my skin crawl. She was already rehearsing the story for the Margaret's surrounded. "Is there anything we can do to help her?" I asked, playing my role as the concerned but naive mother-in-law. Funpun and Lydia exchanged a look that lasted just a fraction too long. "We just have to keep her comfortable," Evan said. "Make sure she isn't in pain. The medications help with that," Lydia added smoothly. "I'll need to adjust her dosages based on how she's been responding while we were gone." My pulse quickened. This was it. They were about to begin the final phase of their plan. "Should I stay to help?" I asked. "I could take time off work." "That's very thoughtful of you, Mom," Evan said. For just a split second, I almost believed the warmth in his voice was real. "But you've already done so much. You should go home and get some rest." "Actually," Lydia interrupted, her voice sharpening. Maybe Nora should stay tonight, just to make sure everything goes smoothly as we transition back to our normal routine. Evan looked at her, surprised. This hadn't been part of their plan. Lydia, I think Mom has done enough. No, she said firmly. I insist. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Family should be together during difficult times. Something in her tone sent alarm bells ringing in my head. This wasn't about wanting my help. This was about control. Of course, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I'll stay. Whatever you need. Over the next few hours, I watched them fall back into their routine with growing horror. Lydia checked and rechecked Margaret's medications, carefully writing down dosages and times. Evan sat at his laptop. From where I stood, I caught glimpses of travel websites and bank statements on the screen. Dinner was take-out Chinese food, eaten mostly in silence. Halfway through the meal, Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smiled. Good news? Lydia asked. The cruise line confirmed our upgrade. Evan said casually. Penthouse suite. Private balcony. He looked at me. We're taking a long vacation after the holidays. We've been under so much stress with Margaret's condition. That sounds wonderful, I said, my throat tight. You both deserve a break. The casual way they discussed their murder vacation, while sitting just yards from their intended victim, was breathtaking in its cruelty. Later that evening, we sat together in the living room. Lydia began what sounded like a rehearsed speech. Nora, I want you to know how much it means to us that you've been so involved in Mother's care, she said. It really shows what kind of person you are. She's always been dependable, Evan added, patting my hand. Even when I was growing up, Mom was always there when we needed her. The irony made my stomach twist. I had been there, when he needed someone to provide alibis for his crimes. I just want to help, I said quietly. You already have, Lydia replied. But I need to prepare you for what might happen over the next few days. My chest tightened. The doctors warned us that Mother's condition could deteriorate quickly. What do you mean? I asked. Evan leaned forward, his expression grave. Sometimes with brain injuries, patients seem stable for months, then suddenly take a turn. Their body systems start failing one by one. Lydia added, dabbing at her eyes. It's heartbreaking. She paused. But in a way, it's also a blessing. Mother won't suffer much longer. They were flawless. If I hadn't heard Margaret's story, if I hadn't seen the evidence, I would have believed every word. Is there anything I can do to help during this time? I asked. Just be here, Evan said. Having family around makes it easier. Lydia nodded. And if anything happens, if Mother takes a sudden turn, we'll need you to help us understand that we did everything we could. There it was. The real reason they wanted me to stay? They needed their witness present for the final act. Around 10 o'clock, Lydia stood up. It's time to give Mother her evening medications. She looked at me. This might be a good learning experience for you. Nora, she said as we walked toward Margaret's room, in case you ever need to help with her care again. I watched in horrified fascination as Lydia began preparing the injection. She was disturbingly casual about it. Lydia chatted calmly as she drew liquid from several vials into the syringe. This one is for pain management, she said, holding up the first vial. This helps with muscle spasms. And this one helps her sleep peacefully. I watched her hands. The peaceful sleep medication, I realized, was likely the sedative that would keep Margaret unconscious for the next 18 hours. As Lydia administered the injection, I had to fight every instinct in my body to stop her. But we needed them to reveal more. And Margaret had insisted she could handle whatever they gave her, just for one more night. How long before it takes effect? I asked. About 15 minutes, Lydia replied. Dropping the needle into the medical waste container. She'll be deeply asleep. She won't wake up until late tomorrow morning. Evans appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? Just fine, Lydia said smoothly. Mother should rest comfortably now. She smoothed Margaret's blanket with mock tenderness. Sweet dreams, Mother. As we left the room, nausea twisted in my stomach. Margaret was already fighting the drugs flooding her system, and yet beneath the fear I felt something else. Admiration. Back in the living room, Evan poured himself a scotch while Lydia made tea. The atmosphere felt almost celebratory, though they tried to hide it. "I'm exhausted," Lydia said after finishing her tea. "I think I'll turn in early. The guest room is ready for you, Nora." "Actually," Evan said suddenly, setting his glass down harder than necessary, "I think we need to have a conversation first." Something in his tone made both Lydia and me look at him. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before. Cold. Calculating. Almost predatory. "Evan," I said uncertainly. He walked to the window, pulled the curtains closed, then turned back toward me. "Mom," he said slowly, "I need you to understand something about the situation here." Lydia moved to stand beside him. In that moment, they stopped looking like a grieving couple. They looked like partners preparing for battle. "What situation?" I asked, even though my heart was already pounding. "The situation with Margaret's condition," Evan said, "and your role in what's going to happen over the next few days." "I don't understand." Evan and Lydia exchanged a look. This time, something passed between them that made my blood run cold. "Mom," Evan said, his voice shifting into a tone I remembered from his teenage years, the one he used when he was about to lie his way out of trouble. "Margaret is going to die this week." My breath caught. "And you're going to help us make sure no one asks any uncomfortable questions about it." The words hit me like physical blows. Even though I'd known this was their plan, hearing him say it so casually, so matter-of-factly, terrified me. "Evan, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Mom," he snapped. "It doesn't suit you." His voice hardened, all warmth gone. "You've been here 3 days. You've seen her condition. When she dies, and she will die very soon, you're going to tell everyone she went peacefully, surrounded by family who loved her." "You're scaring me," I whispered. It wasn't entirely an act. Lydia stepped forward, her mask of sweetness completely gone. "You should be scared, Nora," she said coldly, "because you have a choice to make." "A choice?" I asked. "You can be part of this family," she continued, "or you can become a problem that needs to be solved." My heart pounded. What kind of choice is that? Evan sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Here's what's going to happen, Mom," he said quietly. "Over the next few days, Margaret's condition is going to deteriorate. Her breathing will become labored." Evan continued calmly. "Her heart rate will become irregular." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. "And eventually," he said, "her body will give up the fight." My chest tightened. "And you're going to be here to witness all of it." Lydia nodded beside him. "You'll see how hard we fight to save her," she added smoothly. "How devastated we are when we lose her." "When the paramedics come," Evan continued. "When the police ask routine questions. When insurance investigators follow up." He leaned forward slightly. "You're going to tell them exactly what you saw." I stared at them. "A loving family," he said. "Doing everything possible for a brain-injured woman who tragically lost her battle." These two people were calmly explaining how they planned to commit murder, and how they planned to use me as their alibi. "And if I don't?" I asked quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Mom," Evan said softly, "you're 64 years old. You live alone." He met my eyes. "You don't have much family besides me." My heart began to race. Accidents happen to elderly people all the time. The threat was clear, even wrapped in gentle words. Real fear settled into my bones for the first time since this nightmare began. "You wouldn't," I whispered. "We really hope we won't have to," Lydia said brightly. "We much prefer having you as our ally, rather than our enemy." She smiled. "After all, family should stick together." I sat there in stunned silence. They weren't just planning to murder Margaret. They were prepared to kill me, too. If I didn't cooperate, I need some time to think, I finally said. "Of course you do," Evan replied, standing and walking over to pat my shoulder. The gesture felt like a snake wrapping around my neck. "Take all the time you need," he said calmly. "But remember, we start tomorrow morning, and we need to know that you're with us." I walked to the guest room on shaking legs. Behind me, I heard them whispering in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Predators discussing their prey. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my entire body trembling. They had just threatened my life as casually as someone might discuss the weather. And tomorrow, they were going to begin murdering Margaret, while forcing me to watch, and later lie about what I had seen. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly suspect, was that every word of their confession had been recorded. The hidden devices Margaret and I had planted throughout the house were already capturing everything. The trap had been sprung, and they had walked straight into it. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the house made me flinch, wondering if Evan and Lydia had decided I was too much of a risk to keep alive until morning. But when dawn broke through the guest room window, I was still breathing, still alive, still determined to see their plan through to the end. At 6 o'clock, I heard movement in the hallway. Lydia had begun her morning routine, checking on Margaret and preparing what she would later claim were prescribed medications. I lay still, listening to her soft footsteps and quiet humming. It was horrifying how normal she sounded while preparing to commit murder. Around 7, there was a soft knock on my door. "Mom, are you awake?" I opened it to find Evan standing there with a cup of coffee. His face showed what looked like genuine concern. The performance was so convincing that, for a moment, I almost forgot who he really was. "I brought you coffee," he said gently. "I know last night was a lot to process." "Thank you," I said, taking the cup. My hands barely trembled. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" I looked into his eyes, my son's eyes, and saw absolutely no trace of the boy I had raised. "Yes," I said quietly. "I understand what you need from me." The words tasted like poison. Evan's face relaxed into something like relief. "I knew you'd see reason, Mom." Evan said quietly, "Family has to stick together, especially during difficult times." "Of course," I replied softly. "I just want to help." "Good," he said. "Lydia is going to start documenting changes in Margaret's what condition today. She may need you to witness some of those changes, just to confirm what you've observed." "I understand." Evan patted my shoulder again, that familiar gesture, the one that now made my skin crawl. "You're doing the right thing, Mom," he said. "This is what's best for everyone." After he left, I dressed quickly and went to Margaret's room. Lydia was already there, adjusting IV lines and making notes on a chart. "How is she this morning?" I asked. "I'm concerned," Lydia replied, her voice full of practiced worry. "Her breathing seems more labored than usual, and her color is off. I think we may be seeing the beginning of the decline the doctors warned us about." I looked at Margaret, lying motionless in the bed. Her breathing did seem slightly heavier, but I knew the real reason. It was whatever Lydia had given her the night before. "Should we call the nurse?" I asked. "I already did," Lydia said smoothly. "She'll be here this afternoon to reassess." She made another note on the chart. I also contacted Dr. Keller's office to let him know about the changes. Dr. Keller, Margaret's supposed neurologist, another thread in their carefully constructed web of lies. I wondered, not for the first time, whether he even existed, or if Lydia was managing that deception too. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Just keep watch over her while I prepare her morning medications," Lydia said. "If you notice any changes in her breathing or color, let me know immediately." I sat beside Margaret's bed, gently holding her hand. To anyone watching, I looked like a caring family member offering comfort. But in reality, I was checking for the sign we'd agreed on, a slight pressure of her fingers, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. It came. Margaret was awake, aware, ready. Over the next few hours, Lydia orchestrated what could only be described as a masterpiece of deception. She documented declining vital signs, noted changes in breathing patterns, and made concerned phone calls to medical professionals who existed only in her imagination. "I'm worried about fluid in her lungs," she said into the phone. "Yes, I know it's a common complication with prolonged bed rest. Should we increase the respiratory therapy?" Evan played his role perfectly as well. The devoted son-in-law, struggling with the impending loss of his wife's mother. He made tearful phone calls to imaginary relatives, updating them on Margaret's condition. "I think we should prepare ourselves," he told me around lunchtime. "Lydia thinks it might happen within the next 24 to 48 hours. So soon? I managed to gasp, staying in character. "These things can progress very quickly once they start," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "But at least she won't suffer much longer." The nurse arrived right on schedule at 2 o'clock. I watched nervously as she examined Margaret, wondering if she would notice anything suspicious. Her brow furrowed as she checked the equipment. "Her oxygen saturation is lower than I'd like to see," she said. "And her heart rate is more irregular. These can be signs of organ stress." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "It could mean her body is starting to shut down," she said gently. "I'll need to call Dr. Keller and see if he wants to adjust her care plan." After the nurse left, Lydia seemed pleased with how the visit had gone. "You see how it works," she said quietly. "The nurse is documenting everything. When this is over, there will be a clear medical trail showing the natural progression of her condition." That evening, we sat down for what I knew would be our last family dinner. Evan opened a bottle of wine, celebrating what he called getting through a difficult day. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "To family," Lydia echoed. "To family," I repeated, though the word felt hollow in my mouth. As we ate, they casually discussed their plans with the same cruelty I'd grown used to. The cruise, the house they wanted to buy with Margaret's money, the new car Lydia had already chosen. "We're thinking of moving to Florida after everything settles down," Evan said. "Fresh start. Too many sad memories here." "And what about me?" I asked, playing into their assumption that I would remain part of their deception. Evan and Lydia exchanged one of their looks. "We were hoping you'd visit often," Lydia said sweetly. "Maybe even relocate eventually. Family should stay close, especially after something traumatic. They wanted to keep me nearby, to monitor me, to make sure I never told the truth." "That sounds wonderful," I said, smiling at them both. Around 9 o'clock, Lydia announced it was time for Margaret's evening medications. "This might be the last dose we give her," she said quietly. "I'm going to increase the respiratory suppressants. If her body is already struggling, this should ease her transition." Transition? Such a gentle word for murder. I followed them into Margaret's room and watched as Lydia prepared what I knew was a lethal cocktail. She was careful this time, measuring precise amounts, documenting every dose. "This is a merciful thing we're doing," she said as she filled the syringe. "She's already gone, really. We're just helping her body catch up." Evan nodded solemnly. "It's what she would have wanted." As Lydia moved toward Margaret's IV line, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. This was it. The final proof. "Wait," I said suddenly. They both turned toward me, Lydia's hand frozen midair. "I want to say goodbye first," I said, moving to Margaret's bedside. "In case she doesn't wake up." "Of course," Evan said softly. "Take your time, Mom." I leaned down, pretending to whisper words of comfort. But what I actually whispered was one word. "Now." Margaret's eyes snapped open. The effect was electric. Lydia screamed, dropping the syringe as its contents spilled across the floor. Evan stumbled backward, his face draining of color. "Hello, Lydia," Margaret said clearly as she sat up. "Surprised to see me awake?" For a moment, no one moved. We stared at her as if she had risen from the dead. That's impossible," Lydia stammered. "You've been unconscious for months. Your brain is damaged. You can't..." "Can't what?" Margaret interrupted calmly. "I can't think. Can't remember. Can't plan?" She swung her legs over the side of the bed with surprising ease. "Oh, my dear Lydia," she said. "I remember everything. Every injection. Every forged signature. Every dollar you stole." Evan found his voice. "This is impossible. You're confused. You're having an episode." "Am I?" Margaret replied. She reached for a small recording device on the bedside table. "Then perhaps you can explain this." She pressed play. The room filled with their own voices. "Margaret is going to die this week, and you're going to help us make sure no one asks any uncomfortable questions." Evan's face went from white to gray. Lydia looked like she might faint. "Keep listening," Margaret said calmly. The recording continued. Her breathing will become labored. Her heart rate will become irregular, and eventually her body will give up the fight. "You recorded us," Lydia whispered. "For months," Margaret replied. "Every confession, every plan, every casual discussion about my murder." She looked at them steadily. "Did you really think I would just lie there helpless while you destroyed my life?" Evan lunged forward. Margaret raised her hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said. "Those recordings are already in the hands of the police, the FBI and the district attorney." She smiled. "They've been watching this house since yesterday afternoon." Right on cue, we heard car doors slam outside. Heavy footsteps approached. "Police, open up!" Lydia collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Evan stood frozen, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "You see," Margaret continued calmly as the doctor burst open and armed officers flooded the room. "I've been working with federal investigators for months. Healthcare fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. You've both been very busy criminals. Hands where we can see them," an officer shouted. Evan and Lydia were handcuffed and read their rights. The nightmare was over. As they were led away, Evan looked back at me. "Mom," he said desperately. "How could you do this to your own son?" I looked at this stranger, this man who had never truly been my child, and I felt nothing but relief. "You're not my son," I said quietly. "My son died a long time ago. You're just a criminal who happens to share my DNA." After they were gone, Margaret and I sat in the quiet kitchen drinking tea. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "From the moment I realized what they were doing," she said. "I contacted the FBI through a lawyer friend. We've been building the case ever since." She smiled. "They needed proof of intent to commit murder. Your presence here as their witness was the final piece." "What happens now?" I asked. "They go to prison for a very long time," she replied calmly. "Healthcare fraud alone carries 20 years. Add elder abuse, theft, and conspiracy." She shrugged. "They'll be old before they see freedom again." "And the money?" I asked. "Recovered. Every dollar," she said. "The FBI was tracking every transaction." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Nora. Without you, they would have gotten away with it." I thought about how close they had come. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't listened, Margaret would be in a grave, and they'd be planning their cruise. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Live," she said simply. "For the first time in months, I can live without fear." "And you?" I thought about it. At 64, I was starting over. No son, no obligations, no one left to please but myself. "I think I might travel," I said. "I've always wanted to see Ireland." Margaret's eyes lit up. "I've always wanted to see Ireland too," she said. "Maybe we could go together." The idea filled my chest with warmth. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Margaret and I stood on the cliffs of Moher, laughing as the Atlantic crashed below. Evan and Lydia had both been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The case made national headlines. I testified at their sentencing, looking them in the eyes as I described the terror and betrayal they had caused. They showed no remorse, but justice had been served, and more importantly, we had found something neither of us expected: freedom, friendship, a second chance. As we walked back to our car, Margaret linked her arm through mine. "Where to next?" she asked. I smiled. "Anywhere we want." And for the first time in my life, that was true. Now I'm curious about you. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced betrayal like this? Comment below. And if you stayed until the end, thank you. On the final screen, I'm leaving 2 other stories you might enjoy.